Hello and welcome to the Journeymen podcast. I'm Joseph Corlett.
I'm Mark Reeves.
Join us as we travel from club to club, delving into the stories, tales and myths that help define the ethos and identities of football clubs all around the world.
We'll look at club history from all angles, whether it be the team's tactical style, superstitious fan rituals, or discussing the best players to grace the shirt.
For our base in Berlin, we aspire to give clubs of all sizes a platform to discuss their greatest triumphs and toughest heartbreaks.
We'll take you through fascinating untold stories with tales of heroes, villains, promotions, relegations, and everything in between. We're back for part 2 of Athletic Club. Really enjoyed the first episode and we're ready to delve into it again, and it was great to get some feedback from some people already in the first part.
In part 1 we touched on the early pioneering steps of football developing in the Basque country, the originators of Athletic Club like Juan and Luis Astorquia, and the first superstars like Pichichi and Zara, and dominating the Copa del Rey in their early days.
However, there was one thing that did come up a few times, was how we didn't go into the full detail, the famous story, or maybe even contradicting stories, as once we sort of delved our head into it, of where Athletic Club got their now sort of common red and white striped shirts from.
Forgive us, we'll dive into both of them, as I think both are quite charming and funny stories in their own right. We're not quite sure which is the legitimate one, but either way, we'll dive into them right now. So, we were informed by the likes of the Bilbao Black Cats, a Sunderland and Bilbao supporters branch, that during our research there's been some developments in the classic tale. So we'll tell both sides of the story, and we'll kick off with what currently stands on Athletic Club's website.
So in the holiday period of 1909, Juan Elarodi, Athletic Club player and board member, travelled to London. Looking to take advantage of his journey, the Athletic Board asked him to purchase a new set of blue and white shirts in the style of Blackburn Rovers. And up until that point, Athletic had played in blue and white since 1902, after Juan Moser, an Irish dissident living in Bilbao, gifted the kits to the Lions before they left for their victorious Copa de la Coronación, which was the precursor to the Copa del Rey.
In a classic kind of man style, I would guess, Elderai left his mission until the last day and was unable to find jerseys that he'd been sent to look for.
This is me every Christmas, every birthday, outside, queuing up with just a group of other blokes trying to find the...
Christmas Eve, when you get the deals, that's when it happens. Anyway, he was sailing back from Southampton, so he had a look around, and whilst waiting to catch the ferry back to Bilbao, he had failed to find any Blackburn-style tops in the South Coast city, obviously. But there were plenty of Southampton ones, and lucky for Juan, the colours of the Saints' jerseys matched those of the official flag, or the city flag, of Bilbao.
Preferring to not go empty-handed, and we've all been here, it's like... the missus, will she like that? It's better than just nothing, isn't it?
It'll be all right.
It'll be all right. Just get some smelly stuff for the bath or something like that. But yeah, preferring to not go home empty-handed, he bought 50 shirts. The board accepted the new look, and apart from the occasional narrowing or widening of the stripes, as well as other minor alterations, so the story goes, this style has then not changed for over 111 years. So this is what's been held in folklore and sort of been the accepted story. But research as recent as January this year, 2025, debunks this story with Sunderland rather than Southampton being the inspiration behind the stripes.
Firstly, we were mistaken in thinking that the first match in Bilbao was in 1890, and that was reported in the Glasgow Evening Post, as we mentioned in part 1. Rather, it was 1 year earlier, and it was reported in the Sunderland Evening Echo, which points to influence in the ship workers' footballing community in Bilbao at the time. The fresh reason for the change from blue and white to red and white stripes comes from a clash with local rivals Real Sociedad. In 1909, Athletic Club visited San Sebastian to help inaugurate Sociedad's new pitch, and the weather was horrendous with continuous rain, and so this lack of visibility, coupled with the clashing colours of both clubs, with Athletic Club's blue and white halved shirts and Real Sociedad's blue and white striped shirts, led to a falling out between the two teams over who should be the ones to change their colours.
It's quite impressive that they even attempted to play like that. I don't know, I'm just imagining Chelsea against Everton in all blue or something.
In a grey, horrible, rainy day
Yeah, on a
too.
rainy day as well, yeah. So Athletic Club protested that they were formed earlier, but Sociedad came back straight away and said, well, we're the reigning cup champions and we're not changing. We're the champions, why should we change?
This dilemma continued to rumble on with no change coming. However, Athletic Club finally made the move, switching from red and white stripes, as a member of the team had lived in Sunderland in his youth working as a marine engineer. Plus, at the time, the Black Cats were very successful in England with 4 titles under their belt.
And it's believed that Juan Arizaga had contacted a friend of his in Sunderland who could purchase some red and white shirts from a shop located on Fawcett Street, Sunderland. And through further connections to the shipping industry within Athletic Club, they found a route to get the shirts delivered from Sunderland, with import records providing evidence for the prize cargo arriving in the Basque country in January 1910, which is amazing that there's been evidence for this found, and with the connection to the shipping industry, got the shirts there. And just 3 days later, these new shirts would see the light of day in a competitive game against fellow Basque side Sporting de Irún. Irún claimed a 2-0 win on the day. From the original story, it's told that the surplus shirts from El Arodi's haul, or from the Sunderland shipment, were sent to the early members of Atletico Madrid. So it's either Sunderland or Southampton that has inadvertently left its mark twice on the Liga.
And this is where we jump into our kind of second connection, which we didn't get into in part one, with how Athletic Club and Atletico Madrid now have this kind of, not being an official friendship, but these early connections that bring the clubs together, and how, well, their shared colours kind of suggest as well.
The origins of Atletico Madrid stem from 3 Basque students that wanted to set up a club after watching Athletic Club win the 1903 Copa del Rey in Madrid. Eduardo de Ajo was one of these students who travelled to Bilbao to propose this idea for like a Madrid branch of the Bilbao club.
The idea was immediately granted by the administrators in the Basque country, and after meeting at Sociedad Vasco Navarra in Madrid, this officially gave birth to Athletic de Madrid, Athletic being spelt like Athletic Bilbao in the English way as well.
Athletic Club would send a batch of kits with the same blue and white theme, and the ties between the clubs were so close that Athletic de Madrid couldn't participate in national tournaments. This led them to sending their best players to help the Basque club compete.
The Madrid branch would only play friendlies to avoid competitive clashes with their parent club, but eventually began to compete in the Madrid Championship, whose winner would go on to compete in the Copa del Rey as a representative of Madrid, except if the Basque representative was Athletic Club.
1 year later, the founders of the Madrid branch began to put in motion the idea of officially disassociating itself from Athletic Club so they could actually compete in these tournaments. But the clubs continued to and share friendly relations, both making the switch to red and white stripes, for example, even though Athletic Club would switch back to black shorts and Atletico Madrid would keep the original blue shorts.
As football began to formalise in Spain, the two clubs would drift apart. For example, in 1921, Pichichi would claim his final title with the Bilbao side, as they were crowned national champions with a 4-1 win over their Madrid, and inverted commas, brothers at San Mamés.
Both become founding members of the La Liga as well in 1928-1929 season. The first top-flight meeting came in April 1929 at the Estadio Metropolitano in Madrid, with the visitors winning 3-2. I think it's fascinating that from this one club, like, we now have two giants, not even just of Spanish football, of European football, massive clubs to come from that same spot. I remember when we were in Madrid and we went to the museum, didn't we, and we saw the original shirts and things like that, the original sort of Blackburn inspired shirts as well, and things
which
like
were
that.
Very formal, actual shirts almost. Like when we think of modern football shirts these days, they're almost quite plastic and synthetic, and they were running around in dress shirts almost.
Imagine if it was raining and you were wearing one of them as well.
No wonder they were falling out in Sociedad and Bilbao with those original colours. But it's also kind of funny to think of the modern day now, with multi-club ownership being quite a toxic kind of subject in modern European football.
Are you labelling them as an early Red Bull?
It feels kind of similar, but the fact that Atletico Madrid try to break away and make their own club, that's definitely better than how it is nowadays anyway.
Felt like more, it's these three guys who have gone to study or to university and setting up their own supporters branch, but has just developed into something way bigger than they ever thought it would do.
Fantastic story anyway. But from this point, we kind of move on from the topics we missed in part one, and we jump back up into our original timeline, which was we were just about to get into the early 80s with Athletic Club. So in 1981, Javier Clemente became manager of Athletic Club, and he put together one of the most successful teams in the club's history. So the main lineup of this team was Zubizarreta, Yurkagia, De La Fuente, De Andreas, Sola, Uchubi, Dani, Sarabia and Argote.
So what was so iconic about this season, the 82-83 season, was that this team was entirely made up of youth players who would go on to become La Liga champion after surpassing Real Madrid in the table on the last day. This was a really strong period for Bilbao, who had developed a group of talented but highly aggressive and physical players under Clemente.
A última hora había confusión si iba empate a 1 o 1-0.
Pero campeón, ¿qué sientes ahora?
Bueno, una alegría que no puedo, ahora en este momento. El Bilbao campeón, ¿qué te parece?
Enhorabuena. Javier, muchos te han llamado chulo. ¿Qué les puedes contestar ahora mismo?
bueno, pues que yo sigo siendo el mismo y que ahí está, el esfuerzo ha sido de los jugadores y somos campeones. Hay que felicitar al Madrid, pero creo que no mereció ser campeón.
The title in 1983 was their first champion for 27 years, while Barcelona had defeated Real Madrid in the cup final. It was clear the following season could be a close affair between the three clubs, with the added elements of a clash in style and personality between Barcelona manager Luis Menotti and Clement, both of whom were not afraid of expressing their opinions to the press.
Barcelona also felt very strongly that their 1982 title bid had been ruined by a serious knee injury to influential midfielder Ben Schuster, sustained in a challenge from athletic defender Andoni Goycochea, also known as the Butcher of Bilbao.
What a mad nickname that is.
It really was as well.
Barcelona too, at the time, had a reputation for hard play, which at times could descend into outright violence, which is mad to think of in contrast to their modern tiki-taka Pep Guardiola style. And the club had even received fines from UEFA for their bad conduct in recent European matches, including the 1982 European Super Cup. So they weren't afraid to get down and dirty in some of the biggest games in European Cup finals.
I think that's why this rivalry ended in some of the most disgraceful, I can't even call them a challenge or tackle, the most disgraceful assaults you'll ever see. You just, some of these clips on YouTube from these games are insane. And yeah, so it was in September of 1983 when Goycochea achieved this notoriety for a foul on Diego Maradona, described as one of the most brutal fouls ever delivered in the history of Spanish football.
From the highs of us talking about him with our Newell's episodes to now this kind of...
She's just been kicked around.
Yeah. In a league match at the Camp Nou, Andoni tackled the Argentine from behind and broke his ankle. Maradona compared the sound of his ankle breaking to that of wood snapping. And in the aftermath, English journalist Edward Owen coined the phrase Butcher of Bilbao to describe Goycochea, and the nickname just stayed for the rest of his career. And I mean, if you're throwing tackles around like that, it's not undeserved.
He didn't just do it once as well. This is why he really had that nickname. Cesar Luis Menotti, the coach of Barcelona, accused the Spaniard of belonging to a race of anti-footballers and called for a lifelong ban. He was served a 10-match ban by the Royal Spanish Football Federation. And it was later reported, this bit is really crazy, that it was later reported that he kept the boot he had used to destroy Maradona's ankle ligaments at home in a glass case.
Maradona states in his biography that Goycochea told him before the match he was going to break his leg as well. So this was premeditated assault. This wasn't by accident, I've stepped on your ankle. This was just violence at the highest level of football. And then just a few months later, the two teams would meet again in the 1984 Copa del Rey final. The match would end 1-0 to Athletic Club, so hooray there, Athletic claim another Copa del Rey for their trophy cabinet. However, the match descended into a mass brawl on the pitch, with Goycochea, the Butcher, kicking Maradona in the chest. He was initially banned for 18 games for this actions, but the suspension would be somehow reduced to 7.
Maradona and his Barcelona teammates got plenty of their own kicks and everything in as well. It's one thing, I'm sure we can link the YouTube video somewhere, but you need to see just this complete chaos of this game. But what makes it even more fascinating was that Maradona had actually been sent off in the semi-final, but controversially had been allowed to play in the final despite being suspended, which would caused a massive thing between the clubs and federation and everything. But this was because Maradona, they wanted him to be in the final as the big showpiece event.
Sarabia que sigue con esa pelota y final del partido con el triunfo del Athletic de Bilbao por 1-0. Final del partido cuando ha habido una agresión entre Maradona y jugadores del Athletic de Bilbao. Atención, se están golpeando sobre Maradona y hay un enzarzamiento general, ahí lo ven ustedes, de Maradona con varios jugadores del Athletic de Bilbao. Ha llegado ahora Miguel y le ha golpeado también Clos sobre Pachi Salinas. Y atención, porque, señores, ha terminado esto entre reparto de golpes de los jugadores.
And this legacy of being the Butcher of Bilbao, built on his tackles against Maradona and Schuster, earned him this nickname, and it lives on to this day. In 2007, the English newspaper The Times named him as the hardest defender of all time. But we can't help but think most violent would have been a better title.
Hard man for me, there's a fine line, and this is way over that line. This is genuinely just an absolute thug.
I feel like Goycochea here would eat Roy Keane for breakfast.
Oh, yeah. Although I would still back Duncan Ferguson, I think.
Let's just get a big old Royal Rumble and see who comes out on top.
Until I hear a story about Goycochea also doing it off the pitch, because there's multiple ones of Duncan Ferguson beating the shit out of people who tried to rob his house and stuff.
That's more commendable. That's more commendable violence, to be fair.
And can you imagine being the kid of realising like you're robbing a house on like Liverpool somewhere and then realising you've robbed Duncan Ferguson's house and he's in and he's coming for you?
Big mistake. Big mistake. And away from the violence and back to footballing matters, in 85 and in 86, the Athletic Club finished 3rd and 4th respectively. But during the 85-86 season, Clement was fired due to his bad relationship with the team star Manu Sarabia.
Clemente's departure was a consequence of his disagreements with the striker, but what makes this actually pretty funny when you compare it to what we were just talking about is that he'd made the decision to remove the player from the team, blaming him for an alleged lack of discipline on the pitch. Which you've got to laugh at that, especially when you've just heard about and watched the butcher's antics on the pitch.
I think it's one of those classic things where if he's a striker, you've got to be putting it in the goal, and if you're the butcher of Bilbao, you've got to be killing people. Otherwise, you're going to be suffering from a lack of discipline, in inverted commas, I probably guess. The board of the club urged the coach to retract this decision as well, but Clement refused, so he was dismissed in January of 1986. Some players of the team publicly expressed their disagreement with the board's decision as well. So it does sound that behind the scenes there was a wild contrast of views and opinions on this sacking.
Yeah, and especially the sort of in the midst of so much success that he'd had as well. Like Clemente had led the club to 2 La Liga titles, a Copa del Rey and a Super Copa as well. So yeah, it's a shame to see it end this way, but it won't be the last we'll speak about Clemente specifically in this episode.
Sarabia survived the conflict with the manager and continued with the club for 2 more seasons during his 12-season stay at the club. He scored 118 goals in 382 games, and a succession of coaches followed in the footsteps of Clement and failed to kind of bring success back to the club.
Yeah, by this point the team was old and worn out, and so for the 1987-88 season, Athletic went back to England to find a coach who could take charge of them. Everything pointed to Everton's manager, Howard Kendall, and we've got to say, like, there's something quite poetic at this point of the return of an Englishman to Athletic Club, a club that even is still spelling its name the English way, and everything is, it's great.
Kendall had left Everton in the summer of 1987, frustrated by the ban of English clubs in European competition at the time. As well as the missed opportunity for more European success with Everton, the ban on English clubs was a major factor for some of England's leading players moving overseas during the time, including Gary Lineker, who signed for Barcelona after just 1 season at Goodison Park.
And Kendall managed to rejuvenate the team with players from the youth system, such as Patsy Ferreira, Andrea Neuer, Alcorta, Garitano and Uraita. Thanks to this, Athletic managed to qualify for Europe, and the 88-89 season was a rather irregular season in the league. As far as continental competition was concerned, Athletic went through without pain or glory, being eliminated by Juventus in the round of 32. Halfway through this campaign, Kendall would be sacked and the former red and white player, Rocio, took over the bench.
In the 89-90 season, Athletic signed a young striker, Loren, from Real Sociedad for a record figure in those days of 300 million all pesetas, just under €2 million in today's money. But the signing ended up being an absolute failure since he only scored 6 goals in the entire season. It was said that the pressure of the money and the price tag on his shoulders took the toll on him.
Yeah, and that's like the sort of one of the first ones that we'll see a few more of Athletic spending big money to sign players from Sociedad, which adds to like this animosity that grew stronger over these like coming years between the fans. Jose Angel Iribar, Jupp Heynckes and Javier Uraita, and even a returning Clemente failed to reproduce his initial success. It was in 1992 that Jupp Heynckes was appointed the manager of Athletic Club, becoming only the 3rd manager in Spain's La Liga after Hennes Weisweiler, which is a great throwback to our Cologne episode, and Udo Lattek, who both of which had managed Barcelona.
Heynckes managed his first game against Cadiz in September of 92, and he led them to an 8th place finish in his first season. They were eliminated in the 3rd round of the Copa del Rey, and he continued to lead the Basque club to 5th in the league the following year, but more importantly qualifying them for the UEFA Cup. They were eliminated in the 4th round of the Copa del Rey, and Heynckes would unfortunately be fired in the summer of 94 after a new club president was elected. So he got them into Europe and then was fired.
And you read about this quite a lot, like even coming up in the research of Athletic Club, but also then via that connected to other Spanish clubs of a new president coming in, and we've even had it like managers who've done really well. They're changed because they're not the president's man. But in the 94, 95 and 95-96 seasons, these would prove to take a drastic downturn and would be actually quite disastrous for Athletic Club, in which the only shining star was Julen Guerrero, who with his play and his goals thrilled the fans at the San Mamés.
Come the end of the 95-96 season, Athletic Club finished 15th in the league, which was the worst classification for the club in its history, a resounding failure as things began to slump.
Which is amazing as well. Like, I know it's something we're going to mention a few times, but like, we're in the 90s now. They were a founding member of La Liga, they've just had their worst ever season, 15, still never been relegated at this point, a club that can't sign players how every other club can. When you think of how the club has been doing those 2 seasons back to back and finishing them 15th, something really had to change.
And after 2 years for the new 96-97 campaign, Athletic wanted to make a radical change, and they hired the services of former PSG coach Luis Fernandez. He added players like Emol Echebia, striker Ismail Erzais, and the young star Joseba Echebia, who arrived again from Real Sociedad at just the age of 17.
The reason why he could join was the club adopting a more flexible approach to the cantera. So this deal that they signed Echebia from Sociedad caused a lot of bad feelings because they decided it isn't just from their own academy, you can sign Basque players from other Basque or regional clubs.
However, this change in approach and maybe this change in flexibility to their philosophy did lead to success as they finished second in La Liga and qualified for the UEFA Champions League in 1998. The season also marked the year that Athletic became a centenary club. To commemorate this historic date, the club organised a series of events, such as concerts by Luciano Pavarotti and the Rolling Stones. Definitely a clash of styles there. Hopefully they weren't performing at the same time. But the main event was a match between Athletic and the Brazilian national team.
The match was played in May 1998, and it was the first time the Brazilian national team had ever played a club. Rivaldo scored the equaliser as the game finished 1-1.
It's a very special niche of football matches where a club plays a national team, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very testimonial, or opening a new stadium, or like this, centenary or something.
Tafarel dejó la pelota en el área chica y Carlos García marca el primero. Vaya fiesta. Nada menos que está enfrente Brasil. Se celebra el día grande del centenario y las cosas no podían comenzar mejor para el Athletic.
Throughout the season, the Lions fought to finish as high as possible in the table, and finally the last match day arrived. Athletic depended on itself to qualify for the Champions League and tried to solidify the runners-up position in the league. As luck would have it, the last league match was played at San Mamés. Echebia opened the scoring in the 40th minute in the first half, and the red and white team held on for a result until the end of the match. As soon as the referee blew the final whistle, euphoria broke out at San Mamés. Athletic Club celebrated its 100th year anniversary by being proclaimed runners-up in the league and qualifying for the Champions League once again.
Echebia was a very prominent member of this squad, along with Urtziz and Julian Guerrero. Urtziz would prove to be a brilliant signing and actually spent 11 years in Bilbao. Interestingly, over 16 seasons, he played over 445 games in the Liga and scored 131 goals. What's interesting is 61 of his goals were headers, which is still a record today in La Liga as well.
Feels like Athletic Club weren't afraid to get it up to the big man up top, to be fair.
Yeah.
The club also went ahead and strengthened further by spending 12 million in today's money on the signing of a defender, Roberto Rios, being the highest transfer fee for a Spanish signing at the time and the most expensive in the Basque club's history up until the arrival of Inigo Martinez in 2018, as we mentioned in part 1. But over the next 2 seasons, it became a clear demonstration that the same team that had 2 years earlier been proclaimed runners-up in the league was gradually fading into indifference, moving without much fanfare, falling unfortunately into mid-table.
Yeah, and this season would also mark the beginning of the end for Julian Guerrero, who had become one of the first sort of football celebrities, and his pop-like figure boosted their image overseas. Athletic Club saw how its prized asset of the great idol of the 90s was becoming more and more of a regular on the bench. At the end of the season, Luis Fernandez was finally dismissed and his time at Athletic was over.
Despite some highlights of finishing runners-up in Champions League qualification, Athletic ended the decade with few successes and was marked by institutional and sporting crisis, in which they were on the verge of relegation at times. At the beginning of the 2001-2002 season, Javier Urria was elected new president and brought back Jupp Heynckes for his second cycle. So, after being ousted by not being the president's man, it seems like Javier here was definitely no, Jupp needs a fair chance at it, and brought him back.
It seems to happen a lot of, like, even when someone's done pretty well, the new president comes in, gets rid of him. It happens quite a lot when then another president gets in and brings them back. So we see that here again. And so in the 2 years that the German coach led the team, it improved considerably as they were fighting for the UEFA Cup until the last moment and reached the semi-finals of the Copa del Rey after 15 years without getting that far into the competition, but then being eliminated by Real Madrid. During that time, Heynckes actually renewed the team and gave more prominence to the youth players because, of course, this constant conveyor belt of talent coming through. Of the players he actually brought into the team was Aaron Zubia, Asier Del Horno, later of Chelsea, Luis Prieto, Murillo, Gerpegui and Yeste.
Other players from outside the club were also added, such as Orbaz and Tico. But in a strange twist of fate, in the final stretch of the 02-03 season, Jupp Heynckes would actually criticise their overall Athletic Club philosophy, stating that Athletic is like a Volkswagen in a Formula One race. Shortly before, he had informed the club in writing that he would not continue for the following season.
Just so German as well, thing to say.
I think he would have been more proud of a Volkswagen, to be honest.
Yeah, he's a Porsche man. But even so, the Bilbao club tried to change his mind and presented him with an offer of renewal, but he rejected it. He definitely didn't want to be in this Formula One race. And so I think maybe he could see what was coming. He was relying on these youth players. Maybe there was only 2 or 3 he thought were good enough. And over the next couple of years, they only would narrowly miss relegation in the 05-06 and 06-07 seasons. The 06-07 actually then taking the title as being the worst season in the club's history, where they actually finished 17th, losing 18 of their 38 games, finished 1 point above the relegation zone. Really getting too close for comfort now. But yeah, like we said before that, the lowest they'd ever finished was 15th. But after those 2 terrible seasons, they really needed to crack on.
We can only imagine the euphoria of safety in the stadium come the final match day when they were finished 1 point above the relegation zone. As much as they were celebrating Champions League success just a few years before, now all of a sudden they're clinging on in La Liga. The club failed to stabilise in 2005, losing 2 key players from the previous seasons. Mark's beloved Asier Del Horno went to Chelsea, and Santi Esquero finished his contract and moved to FC Barcelona for free.
I actually remember signing Esquero on PES on Master League. And after reading up a bit about him for our research for this episode, turns out he didn't quite make it in Barcelona's first team because another youngster emerged in front of him, the youth graduate called Lionel Messi, which is... yeah, it's quite unlucky, isn't it?
I think Santi can call that a fair one. To I've on the bench because there's this guy called Lionel Messi coming through.
He was probably fuming at the time, and he looks back now and uses that line with pride now, probably.
I was second choice to Lionel Messi.
Yeah. Lionel Messi blocked my development path. It's like the new I could have played, but I just had this terrible knee injury. I could have played, but Messi was in front of me. Fair enough.
In a typical club in chaos style, there was a succession of firing managers for poor performance, including Javier Clemente coming back for a 3rd time. Despite this maybe seeming like a desperate move by Athletic Club to bring back a legend for the 3rd time, it was widely acknowledged that he brought defensive stability to the team and is also credited for having saved the club from relegation due to these tactics. Despite this, he was not left in charge for the 06-07 season, which turned out to be even worse than before, and now this is the worst in the club's history.
And Clemente was once again fired due to disagreements with the board. He'd criticised the signing of promising midfielder Javi Martinez, for whom the club paid €6 million to Osasuna, by publicly stating he did not know him and he had not requested his signing.
Bet Javi felt comforting coming in on that first day. All right, boss, nice to meet you. Who are you?
Who are you?
But despite these disagreements, top flight survival would be ensured on the last match day against Levante as they were beaten 2-0 at San Mamés. These 2 seasons have been remembered as 2 black years.
At the end of the campaign, Ismail Outsides decided to end his time at the club and sign for Ajax. He had played for Athletic for 11 seasons and he played 419 games and scored 129 goals.
Athletic continued to move forward with achieving kind of unspectacular results and finishing in mid-table, which you could say is progress away from a relegation scrap. However, it being the Copa del Rey, where the team pulled through some tough ties, including beating local rivals Osasuna and a strong Sevilla side, to reach their first final in the competition in 24 years.
They would lose that final, but there's no shame in losing it to the team that they did. They would lose 4-1 to Barcelona. It's a very iconic Barcelona team. It's not Valdez in goal, it was Pinto, but we all remember Pinto more for his fighting and stuff in the tunnel. But yeah, Pinto in goal, then Dani Alves, Yaya Toure, Gerard Piqué, Carlos Puyol in defence. Busquets, Xavi, Seydou Keita, Messi, Bojan and Samuel Eto'o. And on the bench, Martin Cáceres, Victor Valdez, Silvinho, Ida Gudjohnsen, Alexander Hleb, Pedro. It's quite a team. Managed by Pep as well, of course.
Out of all those players, I'm surprised you didn't give more fanfare to Ida Gudjohnsen.
I do love him. He didn't even come on, but I'll probably talk about him the most.
The match took place in Valencia, and it was a great occasion for the fans, although losing the final was no disgrace. And as Barcelona that season went on to be unbeaten in La Liga and in the Champions League. Athletic's reward for their efforts was a place in the, inverted commas, new UEFA Europa League tournament for the following campaign. The 09-10 season saw Athletic make steady progress in the league and in Europe, so kind of upward signs of trajectory here with the club once again.
I mean, at least they're away from these relegation battles and things are picking up, and a cup final and things like that. But yeah, some decent home form, including a victory over Real Madrid, led the team to sitting comfortably in the top half of the league and qualifying from their Europa League group, although poorer performances away from Bilbao meant that a really successful run never really materialised. But like you said, these seeds are planted and they seem to have turned a corner at least.
In 2010, the home games often resulted in draws rather than victories, and this proved to be the case in the Europa League, where a draw at San Mamés against Anderlecht was followed by a heavy defeat in Belgium. Ultimately, a promising season delivered little, with Athletic finishing 8th, just outside the European places.
But at least the disappointment has gone back to like not getting European football rather than nearly getting relegated for the first time in your history.
Young stars like Javi Martinez, who I guess has now cemented himself from being "who are you" to, well, now a young star.
We can't lose this guy. No.
Markel Susaeta and Oscar de Marcos performed well, if inconsistently, providing for the main striker Fernando Llorente, while the 16-year-old forward Ika Muniain made a successful breakthrough into the squad. This is becoming, again, these names.
Yeah, you can tell it's like it's another great generation has spawned, hasn't it now? Like they're sort of coming together, and it's like these are all names you know. But what's great is as this is like bubbling along and this new sort of great team is coming through, 500 game man Joseba Exteberia, who we mentioned a little while ago, he's still here. And he would retire this season after 15 seasons at the club. And Francisco Yeste, who'd also played over 300 games, left rather abruptly at the end of the season. But there's this passing of the torch is happening now. Guy who's played 500 games, guy who's played 300 games, and these great youngsters all coming through.
I'd like to think Joseba, like joining the club, riding out through some of their worst periods as a club, and then reaching 500 games and then passing on the baton to this like young, exciting up-and-coming team. What a man to stay all the way through those tough times. The 2010 and 11 season would start positively with Llorente scoring several times, and it would remain that way as the team would achieve qualification for the Europa League with one match remaining, finishing in 6th place.
A defensive crisis led to Borja Akiza from the B squad being drafted in at centre-back, and he retained his place with solid performances. Teenager Muniain started almost every match. In addition, Fernando Llorente broke his own record by scoring 18 goals in La Liga. The signing of Ander Herrera was agreed, although he elected to stay with his club Real Zagota until the summer as they battled relegation.
And just as, these names, these teams coming together, they're scoring goals, they're pushing their way up the league, this is the cherry on top of the cake. As we introduce, or should we say reintroduce, after we have talked about him on prior episodes, none other than Marcelo Bielsa. Prior to the 2011-2012 season, Athletic members held their latest presidential election, with incumbent Fernando Garcia Macua defeated by former player Josu Urrutia. One of Urrutia's election pledges had been to bring in former Argentine and Chile head coach Marcelo Bielsa, and he fulfilled his promise. Word of Bielsa's reputation had clearly moved across from South America to Europe, with his reputation for using unconventional formations and tactics being the main stereotype of this man moving to Bilbao.
Do you know when you can immediately see just like the parallels of what he does everywhere? So as the sort of season kicks off and the fans are getting the first look at the team, there's several players in these unfamiliar positions, including World Cup winning midfielder Javi Martinez, deployed as a ball-playing central defender, and Oscar Marcos used in several matches at left-back, despite being known as a midfielder. And like immediately I'm seeing Oscar de Marcos, and when you check your glasses, it's like it's Stuart Dallas. This is like it's the exact thing he did at Leeds as well.
Despite his status, initial results were not good, which to be honest is quite a trend of Bielsa's kind of stewardship of clubs.
I imagine it takes a lot of getting used to and to get to his fitness levels and everything.
It didn't help that new signing Ander Herrera was also injured, and the players began to adjust as the season progressed. Throughout the autumn, this is where the fruit would start to bear as they produced a strong run of form, finishing top of their Europa League group ahead of Paris Saint-Germain. They would even go one step further, defeating Lokomotiv Moscow in the last 32 as well.
And then this is when it'll get very interesting as Athletic Club draw Manchester United in the next round, and would see them play at Old Trafford in an incredible game, a game that I can actually remember as well, which would see Athletic Club actually win 3-2 against Manchester United at Old Trafford.
I think this is really where Marcelo Bielsa and kind of Athletic Club would have left such a big impression on maybe like the English eyes, both for the manager who had obviously had big success in South America, but this was his first step in Europe, and obviously for a lot of young English fans watching TV, watching this Athletic Club team play in the way they did and dismantle Manchester United at Old Trafford was, I don't know, what a way to do it, what a way to put your mark in the sand, so to speak. Respected Spanish football journalist Sid Lowe describes this game as they were brilliant from start to finish. This team, Athletic Club, no one was expecting much from, and the team was incredibly young.
Only Iraola and Irazoz were over the age of 26 in the starting 11, and Bielsa would guide them to Copa del Rey and Europa League finals. Sid Lowe said, Bielsa's organised chaos. The pitch is divided into 8 squares and they play a series of passing games while attacking a goal at each end, but you're never allowed more than 2 players in each square. It's just this constant movement of players.
Athletic went on to knock out the 3-time European champions with an impressive 2-1 victory at home, so they followed up this iconic win at Old Trafford with a win back at San Mamés, and Fernando Llorente and Oscar de Marcos scoring in both legs as well.
I can remember in the game at Old Trafford, it was like that green Umbro kit, wasn't it? Yeah, I can really remember that.
Del Athletic aquí en Old Trafford.
Como si tienen que volver andando. Cuidado ese balón de Marcos.
¡Qué parada esta!
Mía, qué
¡Madre mía!
¡Ojo que llega Muniain! ¡Gol! Pegar a la eliminatoria, se marcha el público de Old Trafford, se vuelve loco el público del Athletic, hacen una piña los de Bielsa, apareció Muniain después del paradona de Marcos de Gea y esta vez sí le dijo, soy tu amigo de Gea, perdóname, pero voy a marcar en Old Trafford. 1-3 y el Athletic Club que deja mudo al teatro de los sueños que jamás va a olvidar el repaso que esta noche le ha dado el Athletic.
In the quarter-final, they travelled to Schalke of Germany and won the first leg 4-2, despite being 2-1 down in the 72nd minute after a Raul brace. Now that's a throwback.
Athletic drew 2-2 in the second leg, going through to the semi-finals to face Sporting CP. However, they would lose the first leg in Portugal 2-1 after initially taking the lead, but beat Sporting 3-1 at home with goals from Markel Suzaeta, Ibi Gomez and a winner from Llorente in the 89th minute in front of a ecstatic home crowd, which edged them through to the final 4-3 on aggregate.
Yeah, Bielsa's chaotic style had got them to a final. Some great football, Llorente's goals. And Sid Lowe asked Iker Muniain after the Manchester United game before, Bielsa, is he as mad as he looks? And then Muniain replied, no, he's madder.
Which, if you want more detail on Bielsa, feel free to go back to our Newell's episode because, yeah, there's some crazy stories in there and it's just absolutely on brand for El Loco.
Exactly, yeah, it's completely on brand for his kind of thing. Come in, have a bit of a lull at first, put people in really crazy positions, then they get really fit, then they play crazy football, and then you get to a final or something.
So to match the fact that this was Athletic Club's first European final since 1977, it was also the first European final to be hosted in Romania, as the Arena Națională hosted the 2012 final. This was the second consecutive Europa League final contested by 2 teams from the same nation, and the only other all-Spanish final of UEFA's second club competition at the time was the 2007 UEFA Cup final between Sevilla and Espanyol.
Both teams had played in one previous Europa League/UEFA Cup final. Atletico Madrid won the first Europa League final after its renaming in 2010, beating Fulham 2-1 after extra time. And Athletic Club lost in 1977 to Juventus on away goals after the game finished 2-2 on aggregate. The 2 teams have never met in European competition before, but they had met each other 3 times in Copa del Rey finals, with Athletic winning 2 and Atletico Madrid winning 1.
In the La Liga season, Athletic Club had won the home fixture and Athletic Madrid had won their home fixture, so it was all tied up going into this final. It's almost quite poetic that these 2 clubs that used to be almost brothers and linked officially have now come all this way in the history of Spanish football to meet in a European final and contest against one another. However, sadly for Marcelo Bielsa's team, Athletic couldn't maintain their momentum and deliver their first trophy in 28 years, as they lost 3-0 to their Spanish rivals, or Spanish brothers, and it was inspired by the forward player Radamel Falcao, who was named man of the match and became the first player to win back-to-back Europa League titles with different teams.
Also sad that Athletic Club, the club that gave Atletico Madrid their colours, had to play in their away kit in the final, and Atletico Madrid got to play in the home kit as well. I also thought was quite poetic. Looking at the players on display there, they were both great teams with some great names in them, like Falcao, Arda Turan, Diego Ribas, Gabi, Felipe Luis, Miranda, Diego Godin, Courtois, all for Atletico Madrid. And then for Bilbao, yeah, the players that we've been mentioning and raving about, but sadly, yeah, it was one game too far. Also makes you as well, just that the sheer longevity of Diego Simeone as well is it's crazy.
2 Argentinian managers facing off as well.
True, yeah.
Although crushed by this disappointment of losing in the Europa League final, there was another chance to claim some glory from this season as they reached the Copa del Rey final, defeating giant killers Mirandes in the semi-final.
Yeah, and it would be the same opponent as the final in 2009, Barcelona, but who sadly would prove again to be too strong, and another 3-0 loss in a final. But being the runners-up in the Cup meant that Athletic would qualify for the 2012-2013 UEFA Europa League, even though they ended the league season in 10th place. Going into the season, they went through a period of turmoil. The Europa League run that meant that many of the players had been scouted or poached away by bigger clubs who can offer higher wages and definitely Champions League football. Llorente being one of the more painful ones, as his contract was nearing its end and failed to agree a new one. And it also emerged that Spain international Javi Martinez also wanted to leave as well.
Looking through the squad, there were few replacements available under their signing policy. Athletic took a rigid stance on the matter, whereby no offers would be accepted and the clubs wanting to buy these players would have to trigger the buyout clauses within these contracts. However, unfortunately, this is where the big clubs with their big budgets came in. Bayern Munich pinched Martinez despite Athletic's refusal. However, Athletic Club did manage to hold on to Llorente, but this did cause bad blood between himself and the club management over the situation.
Bielsa also had big disagreements with the contractors working on improvements at the training ground as well, which I can just see as well. You know, like some guys in hard hats trying to put something up and Bielsa's like giving it absolute loads to him. Like,
no, it needs to be facing north.
Yeah. No, I said it's painted red. But experienced striker Artiz Adjuriz returned from Valencia for a third spell, while winger David Lopez departed. With this backdrop of uncertainty and all these players that had left from this team that had been successful in terms of getting to cup finals, began the season with poor results. The possession football did not lead to enough goals scored without the presence of Llorente, and the Bielsa tactic of using players regarded as midfielders in defence to boost the overall technique level of the team backfired as opponents created chances with ease.
They would be eliminated in the Europa League at the group stage, and they would also be knocked out the Copa del Rey by Basque club Eibar of the third tier, so really not a good start to this season.
Relegation was actually a threat until a decent run towards the end of the season, and the final league game at the old San Mamés ended in a 1-0 defeat to Levante. Athletic would soon be playing in a new stadium, albeit in a partially completed state. The original stadium began to be demolished after over 100 years of activity there and over 1,700 official matches played.
There would be changes in the squad as well, as Fernando Llorente would eventually leave the club, completing a free transfer to Juventus. But Bielsa would promote young French defender Aymeric Laporte into the side and lock him down with a long-term contract. After finishing in the lowly 12th position in La Liga, Athletic's president revealed that they would not be offering Bielsa a new contract. This would then expire at the end of the 2013 season, and he left the club.
Bielsa had brought so close, but not being able to deliver a trophy. I think the biggest problem was then he put everybody in the shopping window after achieving that, and then you lose your team and you can't go out and just buy people to replace them at this club.
However, for Bielsa's first mark in Europe, you can't say that he didn't put on a show at certain times, and dragging Athletic Club to a European final, unfortunately losing in the final, but getting to a final wasn't an outstanding success, considering that just before this, they'd only just managed to climb themselves away from relegation.
Their fans won't forget the win at Old Trafford anytime in a hurry, will they?
I mean, we're talking about it right now, many years later. That's a perfect example of Marcelo Bielsa's legacy at Athletic Club.
After Bielsa, Ernesto Valverde returned for a second spell as manager, and he signed or brought through several new players as Athletic came fourth in the league, meaning a Champions League campaign for the first time since 1998. Ander Herrera moved to Manchester United for a €36 million deal at the end of the season.
Athletic had a triumphant first full capacity match in the new San Mamés as they defeated Napoli to qualify for the Champions League group stage. However, they would only finish third in the group. Apart from that, they also managed to break their all-time record for points in La Liga after reaching the high figure of 70, just 1 point away from equaling the best all-time mark for a fourth-place team up to that point, achieved by Real Madrid in the 03-04 season.
Yeah, and adding to that, they actually beat Barcelona at the new San Mamés 1-0. This was something they hadn't done since the 2004-2005 season when Javier Clemente was in charge.
Athletic reached the 2015 Copa del Rey final, but once again lost to Barcelona 3-1. And in addition to qualifying for the subsequent Europa League through their league position, Athletic qualified for the Spanish Super Cup as cup finalists. The reserve team at Bilbao Athletic won promotion to the second tier or the Segunda division for the first time in 19 years. So this proved that a good crop of youngsters were coming through once again.
I think that's the thing that keeps happening because of this model of having to bring through your own players, that you are going to have these lulls and peaks, aren't you, of having another great sort of generation coming through.
However, despite talking about lulls, this is where one big highlight came into play, as in the 2015 Supercopa de España at San Mamés, the first leg, Athletic defeated Barcelona 4-0 with Aritz Aduriz scoring a hat-trick at San Mamés.
In the return leg at the new camp, they would actually hang on for a 1-1 draw to win their first trophy since 1984.
During Llorente's time, Aduriz had always been a little bit kind of the second man, and now with Llorente gone, this is where he stepped up and began to make his mark with Athletic Club kind of later in his career.
Cuidado de Marcos, está solo Aduriz, puede marcar, a la primera no, pero a la segunda sí. La defensa del Barça parada, el cansancio que no pudo hacer nada, y Aduriz que pensaba, pero ¿qué pasa? Que estoy solo, nadie me viene a defender, nadie viene a quitarme la pelota, y sentencia la eliminatoria, sentencia el título para darle la copa al Athletic Club de Bilbao. Marcó 3 en la ida y hoy ha marcado el gol de la victoria Aritz Aduriz, Ricardo.
Valverde would leave his position at the end of the 16-17 season after 4 years. During this season, youth graduates Inaki Williams, Ure Alvarez and Kepa Arrizabalaga had established themselves in the team.
August 2018, Athletic announced on their website that Arrizabalaga had paid his required release clause of €80 million, about £70 million, making him the world's most expensive goalkeeper, which this was only about a week or so after the record was set by Alisson's transfer to Liverpool.
B-team coach Gaisca Garitano took over and oversaw an improvement in results, and the club moved well out of danger, narrowly missing out on the Europa League spot on the last day, in fact.
By the 1920 season, they were trying to put together some more consistent results after this sort of up and down. And after the first 5 games of the season, they sat top of the table, the best start for Athletic Club in over 26 years. That form, though, could not be maintained, and by the halfway point, they'd slipped mid-table after several draws. However, in the Copa del Rey, they'd survived 2 penalty shootouts against second-tier opponents, and then defeated Barcelona, who had troubled them in so many finals, to reach the semi-finals.
The club would then face and defeat Granada in the semi-final on away goals, and would meet local rivals Real Sociedad in the final. However, this would be postponed due to the global COVID-19 pandemic. Both clubs happy to delay in hopes of supporters being able to attend the historic Basque derby occasion.
This did not come to pass, and the final was eventually played in an empty stadium in April 2021, with Real Sociedad emerging winners by a 1-0 scoreline. By that time, Aduriz had finally retired from playing, Garitano had been replaced as coach by Marcelinho, and the 2021 Supercopa, originally intended to follow the delayed cup final, was contested, Athletic defeating Real Madrid, then Barcelona, to claim the trophy.
They also defeated Levante in the semi-final of the 2021 Copa del Rey to reach the final, and making them the only team to take part in the showpiece event twice in as many weeks. However, Athletic lost that final as well to Barcelona by a 4-0 scoreline.
The next 2 seasons saw the same kind of results, narrowly missing out on the Europa Conference League by finishing in 8th and consecutive Copa del Rey semi-final exits, although the club did finish as Supercopa runners-up in the 21-22 season, defeating Atletico Madrid and losing to Real Madrid. In October 2021, there was a report from the International Centre for Sports Studies that showed Athletic Club and Desna Chernihiv from Ukraine were the only teams in European continental competitions without any foreign players. They would end the season in 10th place.
In the June of 2022, Esterno Valverde would return to Athletic as his third spell as manager. And in the 23-24 season, Athletic would finally end their 40-year Copa del Rey drought, which is mad to think about when we think of their early days dominating that competition, and to go so long without winning it, despite many close calls. Wow, it took a while, but here they are.
Yeah, this would be the 122nd edition of Spain's primary football cup, and it would be against Mallorca, who were playing in their first final since their only victory in 2003, having lost twice prior. This was Bilbao's 40th final, having last appeared in the final in 2021, with the last victory coming in 1984.
It's kind of mad that Athletic Club finally get to a final, and then they're having to play Real Mallorca, in which, like, in most finals, you'd assume that Athletic Club would be the underdog. However, this is going into this game, I guess it was maybe a slightly different game plan, maybe different tactics, a different mentality, having to play up against Mallorca, who, you know, these up-and-coming underdogs.
When you're looking at the lineups for the teams, once again, of course, all of this Basque talent, but what's great is with Inaki Williams, now joined by his younger brother Nico Williams as well in the same team, which I think is a great story and another great sort of twist on this Basque production line of even a family coming through. It's great to see Muniain still playing for the club on the bench as well.
And despite coming into this final as favourites against Mallorca, it was a 1-1 draw after extra time, and they had to suffer through the pain and the tension of penalties. However, they managed to win 4-2 and secure that 24th Copa del Rey title, ending, as we've already mentioned, a 40-year major trophy drought.
It's crazy to have won 24 and then to not win one for 40 years is crazy. The cup run included some really memorable victories, including a 4-2 win against Barcelona at home and the 4-0 aggregate win over Atletico Madrid.
You can't say they didn't deserve to get there if they've knocked out the likes of Barcelona and Atletico Madrid on the way.
Exactly. Alex Berenguer scored the decisive penalty that proclaimed Athletic champions of the Copa del Rey for the first time in 40 years.
Ataca la pelota. El Athletic Club tiene la gabarra en la ría. El Athletic Club, después de 40 años, acaba de conseguir la Copa de Su Majestad el Rey, aquí en la Cartuja, con miles y miles de aficionados en la grada, con miles y miles de aficionados en la ciudad, con San Mamés a reventar, con decenas.
The club celebrated the triumph with their traditional barge ride along the Bilbao estuary, which was attended by more than 1 million people, and the footage and images of this barge going down the river with everybody on it, and all the fans, it's amazing.
It's also incredible when you think of where the club started from as ship workers as well, to then be celebrating this end of a drought in the riverside by probably where the ship workers would have played football. A beautiful touch, an absolutely beautiful touch. And as Mark already said, the scenes, definitely a change up from that of the typical kind of bus celebrations anyway. Even though we could say, if you go back to our Venezia episode, they definitely like to celebrate on the water as well too.
True, but they even just travel to most games on a boat, don't they? Not got much choice.
Adding on to their Copa del Rey success, they finished in 5th place with 68 points, which was their second highest ever tally, and qualified for the Europa League for the following season.
In addition, Unai Simon won the Zamora Trophy for the best goalkeeper in La Liga, something that had not been achieved by an Athletic goalkeeper since Jose Angel Iribar in the 69-70 season.
These performances would also see the likes of Unai Simon, Nico Williams and Dani Varane all called up to the Spanish national team for Euro 2024, and which they would go on to be crowned champions here in Berlin at the Olympiastadion.
Let's not talk about that.
Why?
No, I mean, me emotionally.
Oh, okay.
Why? It sounded good. I pronounced it perfectly.
And it wasn't just that they were on the bench picking up the winners' medals at the end of the game. Unai Simon was the starting goalkeeper throughout the tournament, and Williams was outstanding throughout the entire tournament too, chosen as the best player in the final.
Once again, like we see, to have 3 players in the team that go and win the tournament, especially as 2 who are integral members, this is another great feather to their bow for that academy.
As we come up to the present day, and this is where we kind of reach our conclusion point with our time here with Athletic Club, and I think we were just to repeat ourselves, both blown away by how a club with such strict transfer philosophy and restrictions have managed to achieve so much, let alone be one of the 3 founding members of the Primera Division, the top tier of Spanish football, that have never been relegated from the top division since its inception in 1929. Or the others being none other than Real Madrid and Barcelona. So that's some huge company to be keeping.
Of course, the youth recruitment, it has to be the very best just because of how the club operates. But to actually implement it and produce so many top players is an incredible achievement.
And apart from that, I think that's where we're going to have to now link to our next episode as we wrap up here, episode 10 with Athletic Club. Mark, do you want to give us our next link?
Yeah, our next club is the very club that Athletic originally took their colour inspiration from. And if you can remember, because there's quite a few clubs involved with those colours and those discussions at the start.
2 different theories we now learnt as well.
But yeah, thanks for listening, and we'll see you on the next one.
We always like to hear your stories. If you're a fan of Athletic Club or you've been at any of these games and seen any of these magical moments, let us know. We always love to see those type of things in the comments and interactions on social media. And obviously, give us a follow, give us a like. If you'd like to keep up to date with our upcoming podcasts, our ground hopping adventures, and kind of everything in between, as well as sometimes a quick giveaway. And apart from that, as Mark's just said, we'll leave it there. I've been Joseph Corlett.
I've been Mark Reeves.
And that's been everything on episode 10 here with Athletic Club. See you in the next one.